and shape our lives in countless ways. Some of us, we may love them or we may hate them.
Right here, please. Go on top. I need to put it on top.
Oh. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yes, as I was saying, the media, civil society, and the government, we may hate them, we may love them, but we can't, and we may run from them, but we can't hide. In other words, we have to engage them regardless of what we think of them. This morning, we have three panelists who would be shedding some insights for us on different aspects of the media, civil society, and government. And so to begin, each one of them, we will give them approximately 12 minutes, inshallah, and then we would have some time for questions and comments, inshallah. To start off, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, our first presenter, Sister Safia Hassan Ali. She was born in Trinidad and Tobago, but recently moved back after 20 years from Florida. And while she was there, she was the director of the Muslim-based program aimed at feeding the homeless. She has volunteered with many American organizations, including the United Muslim Foundation, ISNA, ICNA, and her Florida Al-Maghrib chapter. Florida Al-Maghrib chapter. She has become vocal in the Trinidad community and is best known as a host of Storytime with Sophia, a TV show on IBN. Aside from her Islamic work, professionally she's an optometrist and a member of the Baraka Foundation, which is aiming to bring eye care to Trinidad and Tobago through free medical clinics, and inshallah will be the first Muslim hospital in the Caribbean. She says here, there's a saying many mothers use: little girls should be seen but not heard. And Sophia has broken that rule time and time again and will continue to do so until Muslim women learn to take a stand against ignorance and arrogance. So I have pleasure in introducing Sophia.
Yes, please. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So as can everyone hear me? No. Can you hear me now? Yes. For those of you that have cable, there's a commercial. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? All right, great. So please, I apologize for my height. It is completely and totally out of my control. However, it comes in pretty common in my field as I deal with children often. And very often you can't really tell who's a child and who's the adult. But it works out well. It is an absolute pleasure to speak with everyone today and to be part of such a great event. And to be honest, it is very, very long overdue. Unfortunately, I haven't been here for the entire weekend, and I heard many great things about everyone's country and their recaps from their countries. And I don't know if the state of things in your countries are any better or worse than they are in Trinidad, but if you're from local, then you know that we have great room for improvement. Now, a lot of my determination today is based on my time spent in the United States. While I was in Florida, there was a great need not only to do good, but to show the world that Muslims do good. I grew up in a post-9/11 America, and while I was never personally targeted for my hijab, many of my friends and family were. Anyone that tells you that Trump is the cause of hatred in America has been living under a rock. It has been us against them for decades, for centuries, and I'm only talking about the time that the towers fell. Now, Trump has only made it socially acceptable to do what people have been doing without media and social media coverage for decades. And that is what brings me to my topic today, media and media coverage. The media is the medium through which we learn and exchange news and information, by definition. Theoretically, this is supposed to mean the truth, correct? But none of us are that naive. That seldom actually happens. It is always somebody else's version of the truth. It's always somebody else telling our stories. Now, most of my adult life has been focused on proving what people see in the news to be wrong. In America, the everyday actions of Muslims on the streets, in the grocery stores, in the parks, in the malls, in the schools, are under scrutiny. Every action of a Muslim represents all Muslims, the entire religion. We don't wear our identities on our sleeve, an old saying which my sisters referenced earlier, but on our heads, on our chins. And every person whose name sounds anything like Muhammad, Ali, Khan, Hussein is a terrorist, according to CNN and Fox. Now, the media is the biggest weapon in America. It only fights one side, and more Muslims have made it their job to combat the Islamophobia on TV. We now have added responsibilities to our lives. And it was my job on the streets of downtown Florida, feeding the homeless, for people to see that we don't just feed our own, we don't just clothe our own, we don't just care about our own, but we feed everyone that is in need, and we care for everyone that is in need, no matter size, shape, race, or religion, because that is what the Quran taught us to do. When I walk through the grocery stores, I made it my duty to be kind and smile at everyone, because all it takes is one grumpy Muslim who woke up on the wrong side of the bed for everybody else to think that Muslims are hateful people, that we're all mean. Do you want that responsibility? When you walk outside and people see you being grumpy, whether it be because someone gave you a bad drive on the road, you just had a really bad meeting, the next guy who sees you is automatically going to think, because you didn't greet him with a smile, all Muslims hate non-Muslims. Just as how CNN and Fox count their viewers, every Muslim in today's society, thanks to the media, has to count their viewers and our actions. Now, I know it's not supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to worry about what other people think, because only Allah could judge us. But I'm just talking about the reality, brothers and sisters. This is the reality, whether you want to accept it or not. And shortly after I moved from Orlando to Trinidad, I realized that this was also, unfortunately, the same thing happening here. Except here, you have your own enemies even within the communities, because racism, I don't know if anyone said that word here during this weekend, but racism is a way bigger problem in Trinidad than Islamophobia is. But I'll leave that for someone else to talk about. When I moved to Trinidad, I pitched an idea to the owner of the Islamic Broadcasting Network for a television series. I figured he must have lots of people that work in the studio. It was an idea for somebody else to do. And to be honest, his reaction kind of stumped me. And he said, well, when would you like to start? Mind you, I had recently moved to the country. He barely knew me. He barely knew my family, but he saw the passion inside of me. This was definitely not the response I was expecting, and it was a daunting task. But I realized it was a great opportunity for me. Not to get the fame or the fortune, but rather to be my own storyteller. Someone telling things from the perspective of a Muslim and a female for once. The world needs more Muslims telling the Muslim narrative. And while I knew I wasn't sharing breaking news, I realized there were a lot of misconceptions that the world has about Islam that are based on Islamic history, Quran, and Sunnah. And therefore, it was still a lot of merit with my cause. And so, for the past 3 years, I have been sharing the stories of the lives of the prophets, the Sahabas, and the women in the life of the Rasul. My target was originally children. However, I have found my audience growing to include people of all ages. And you may be thinking, how is this helping fight Islamophobia when my audience is Muslims? However, that is where you are wrong. You would be surprised at how many non-Muslim men and women have come up to me. Are you that girl from IBN? Yeah, that's me. Many Christians have watched my stories on the prophets in amazement, as they never realized that the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Moses are one and the same. Most people don't understand how we respect Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, as one of our prophets, and they are even more baffled to learn that Maryam radiallahu anha, is one of the 4 greatest and most revered Muslim women promised paradise by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is on this foundation that people can understand our similarities and find common ground, our equal faith in goodness, honesty, and peace. And that is what we need everyone to understand. We're all good people. The Quran is a beautiful book. The teachings of Islam are of goodness, not hate or oppression. Now, it wasn't until I was weeks deep in episodes that I truly appreciated this opportunity. I realized that there was also a great void in truly understanding the foundations of Islam, even amongst our Muslim communities, as Sister Nafisa very well showed us. In Trinidad, so much is lost in the continuation of cultural traditions. We put so much emphasis on memorizing du'as and reciting Quran, but people miss out on the actual understandings and application of Islam. People need the knowledge and guidance on how to properly apply the principles of Islam to their everyday lives, not just the actions of their forefathers, and certainly not adding to the stereotypes against Islam. It's hard to teach old dogs new tricks. I apologize to those of you who may consider themselves old. But I decided to educate the new generation. The generation that finds Kanye and the Kardashians way more interesting than the stories of Prophet Adam and Prophet Yusuf. To make these stories more relatable and enjoyable, to get them to truly understand how Islam spread, to get them to understand what Islam has faced and the trials that we have faced since the inception. And it was because of strong young boys and girls, the Sahabas, who helped share the goodness of Islam to the world. ISIS is not a new concept to Muslims. We've been fighting this idea for a long time, as Brother Dawood very wonderfully put it earlier. Now, Trinidad is a beautiful country, and there is so much we have to be grateful for. In respect to the freedom for us to practice our religion, halal food is everywhere. That is one perk that America does not have. Getting time off for Jummah is a constitutional right. The adhan can be heard all over the country in every community. And the best part? Eid is a holiday. We are lucky to have an Islamic TV station, 2, as a matter of fact. And in Trinidad, Islam is widely spread and for the most part accepted by the masses. However, there is still a huge influence from the American media. ISIS is a growing problem here in Trinidad. And if Islamophobia is trending in America, you bet your last dollar it's trending in Trinidad too. We also have another battle to fight. The critics here are not just CNN and Fox, but my own Muslim brothers. I do not mean to offend any of you brothers, but do you not have dreams for your daughters? I can't tell you how many Muslim men have complained about seeing a sister being on IBN. Now I must ask you, brothers, Muslim men demand female Muslim doctors for their wives. You demand female Muslim teachers for your daughters. And I would have thought by now you would appreciate your families watching a modestly covered sister in hijab on TV telling them about the prophets and the sahabas and the history and the beauty of Islam. Would you not? We need to encourage our sisters to get their educations and get jobs to strengthen our communities, to break the stereotypes that Muslim women are depressed and oppressed, because we shouldn't be. I mean, you brothers also get the bad rep, don't you, when these things come about? You're the ones oppressing, you're the ones being violent. Do you really like having that reputation out there? I am on TV to break the stereotypes. We have enough people trying to bring us down in society. My purpose is also to show the non-Muslims the same exact thing. I am not oppressed. I am an optometrist by profession. I drive, I speak freely, and when I am done, yes, I am going home to cook and clean up after my family. Last year, I was interviewed by a local TV host for an Eid special on women shattering the glass ceiling. She asked me, "What is a Muslim woman?" And I told her, well, a Muslim woman is just that, a person who is Muslim and a woman. I am not in any way limited by the religion and my hijab. Whatever choices I have made in my life are to strengthen myself, my knowledge, and my deen, as the Quran has prescribed and allows me to do so. I have rights in Islam that many people are unaware of or choose to overlook. My job in media is to educate people on what Islam really is about. My stories may not be current affairs, but at least it's my story. Stories about my people, Muslims. And I am proud to be a Muslim telling the story of Muslims, because when non-Muslims tell our stories, they get it wrong each and every time. When I finished that interview, I was elated. Finally, my audience had expanded. This was one huge step forward. And then reality hit. A writer from one of the Associated newspapers slandered my religion on Eid Day with an article titled, "How Not to Be Killed by Islamists." It shocked me to the core. People protested in the rain outside of his building, and finally, a few days later, an apology was published. Fast forward to this Ramadan, when the same idiot published yet another poorly timed article titled Hijabonomics, about a sister in hijab having to choose between a job to feed her children and her religion. A representative from the same newspaper called me for my opinion. And while I wanted to curse him, his mother, his sister, his brother, his mailman, and every single person that has allowed that person to be in that role that he is in, I decided to take the higher road. Was I still in this beautiful country where every city has a beautiful mosque and children are encouraged to wear hijab to school? Or was I back in Trumpville? Alhamdulillah, shortly after, he was fired for good. And he gave me the reason to get right back behind the camera. I met with the same TV host this year after Eid, and I shook my head when I heard the same question she asked me a year ago. What are sisters doing? Muslim sisters, are they oppressed? No, we're not. Had she not learned anything in the past year, perhaps she didn't want to. And this was all just a reminder that our work is never done. My hijab gives me the drive like no other to prove the Islamophobes and the naysayers of all religions and races, including my own religion and my own race, wrong. Allah protects me. The prophets and the Sahabas inspire me. If I can change one person's perception of Islam to truly understand the beauty within it, then I'd say it's worth it. I am not a perfect role model for the next generation, but I hope that through my show, that others can find better role models than what they see on TV. It is my responsibility to inspire them to be future ambassadors and storytellers of Islam. I want the youth to be proud to be Muslims and prepare them to stand up against the naysayers. I want the young girls to understand that Khadija radiallahu anha, the Prophet's first wife, was the breadwinner of their family. She was a successful businesswoman. She was not too shy to ask him to marry her. And she was the first to pray behind him. The first to pray salah behind the Rasul. These are the types of strong women the world needs. The way they feel strong enough to handle attacks on hijab and strong enough to make a positive impact on their communities, aside from the allegations of ISIS and Frame Bara. Our youth need to embrace Islam in their hearts, not only when it's time to go to the mosque or because their parents call them for salah. It needs to be in their hearts, it needs to be their choice. We all have our role to play in the world to make it a better place. Allah has given me this opportunity, and I'm going to do what I can to protect my ummah. And I don't speak for anyone besides myself, but I hope that others can be inspired to speak for themselves. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you, Sister Sophia, for sharing that very passionate presentation. And brothers and sisters, now we'll move on to the next presenter. And he is Kwesi Atiba. Yesterday he also presented, so he needs no introduction. But just let me say he is the Imam of the Islamic Resource Society. So Brother Kwesi.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalatu wassalam ala Rasulihil Kareem. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'd. And just like yesterday, all protocols observed, and we can get right into the discussion. I have 10 minutes today again. But this part of our program, we want to speak about dealing with the media, civil society, whatever that means, and the government, the state. I want to start with an anecdote. Some years ago, I was asked by a member of the media, somebody from the press, about an issue. And I told him I had nothing to say on that subject. And he tried to press me again. And I said, I have nothing to say on that subject. And he left. And he wrote an article about Kwesi Atiba saying he has nothing to say. And I thought that was very, very innovative. Because that is the kind of thing that some of the media people will do. If they can't misquote you, they do other things with whatever. And today we have, in terms of media, we have press, we have radio, we have television, and we have now what they call social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. All of those big and small entities, creating news. The present president of the United States talk about fake news and false news and stuff that had nothing to do with being news at all. And that poses a kind of danger to all kinds of people, not only Muslims. I have the opportunity to be even a part of that because I do a radio program called Panchayat. We call it the shortest hour in talk radio. I did it this morning. It's from 9 to 10. And very, very quickly an hour passes. So we refer to it as the shortest hour in talk radio. But we need to understand how the media operates and treat with what comes off, because things go out. And when I went to school, they used to say, there are 4 things that come not back: the spoken word, the sped arrow, the past life, and the missed opportunity. You cannot unsay something. You cannot unring a bell. You cannot unspeak. And in some cases, you cannot unwrite. when you put it out there, then it becomes the public property. And Allah tells us about that in the Quran, that do not go out and broadcast stuff that you shouldn't. And we have just recently faced some of that in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Some ding-a-ling in the United States went on a television show and said that Trinidad and Tobago has some 400 people going to fight in Syria. And that took its own legs. So within quick time, we had New York Times, Washington Post, Rio Globo, Al Jazeera, National Geographic in Trinidad running around asking, doing interviews. We recently had National Geographic coming back and telling us that they know they made a mess the first time they came, so they are trying to correct it. Al Jazeera made a mess, but they haven't come to correct it. And the others also made mess, but they haven't come to correct it. I was interviewed by Rio Globo, and they went back to Brazil, and they sent me the link, and it was all in Portuguese. Not even, English subtitles, so I don't even know what they said. But that is how it is. And as Muslims, as believers, we have to engage with that. But we have to engage with it from a standpoint of knowing what we want to project. Some of us are afraid of the press. Some of us are really, really afraid of the media. Most of us dislike it. But we have to know how to use it. And that is a challenge for the Muslim community in this Western Hemisphere. How do we treat with all the different levels of press, all the different levels of media, without getting panicky and being able to put across what we intend to put across? And our job is to invite mankind to the deen of Islam. So in whatever we do, in however we deal with the press, the bottom line has to be an invitation to mankind. In some cases, we have a big problem. Who speaks for the Muslims? There are some people in our community who very much like to see their faces on television, who like to hear their voices on the radio, who like to see their pictures in the newspapers. So they rush and they talk, they babble, and they say stuff that then the other Muslims have to come and try to fix. And that is something we have to be careful with. Who speaks for the Muslim? Not in Trinidad and Tobago alone. That may affect all the Muslims in the West. And we have to look at that. Our sister here raised the question of Islamophobia, which is a modern designation of stuff that we all know about. When Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, spoke to his father, and his father said, "Move from here before I stone you." What was that? Not Islamophobia? It's the same thing. When our Prophet spoke to his people in Mecca, and they said that, I think it was Abu Jahl, said, "Damn you, damn you." Islamophobia, same thing. They didn't have it then. I don't think there are a word in it in Arabic. I don't know. But it's the same thing. It's nothing new. And Muslims have to understand that this is nothing new. We just have to deal with it in our generation, our time, with our own skills. And we have to develop the skills to deal with it. And as we move forward and we want to talk about this thing they call civil society, and I say, I don't even know what that is, but some people call different things. But we as Muslims, we have a duty to mankind. We have a message to mankind. So we have to work with mankind. There are some Muslims who take the position that other Muslims are some kind of lower creatures, kuffar. But our duty is to invite all to Islam. Some may hear, some may not. So we have to engage with all kinds of people, speaking to them, understanding though that we have a different worldview. Our worldview is standard, will never change. And for those of you who may have done history or sociology or whatever, We know that there was a period in time when some bright people in Europe, who came up with a thing called the Enlightenment. They said that reason was trumping revelation. In some cases, they had good reasons because the Christian church was really, I don't want to use the words, but that's another story. But they decided that they will go along with their own program. And you see where that is today. From the time of the Enlightenment, 18th century, into now, that in the United States, if a man feels that he's a 6-year-old girl, he can go in the girl's toilet. That's where that so-called reasoning, trumping revelation has reached. And this is what they want Muslims to do. They say that the Quran, if you follow it, you will do all kinds of wrong things, you will mess up life. But who mess up life more than those people who have said, you don't need a book? And some people say that, you don't need a book. And then we have had these guys, in the United States, and it will come in the Caribbean too. One of the leading religious practices is atheism. So they are rolling with atheism, and they are rolling with secular democracy, and they are rolling with all these things. And they are asking the Muslims to come along with them. Leave your guidance in the Book of Allah and the example of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and come along with us to our nothingness. And when Muslims reject that, they say, well, you kind of off the ball, you don't know what's going on, you can't live in this society, you're backward. So Allah has given us a position with respect to the death penalty. And they say, well, no, that is barbaric and all of that. So we could live without that. And we see how the societies are going down the line. So we have to share our understanding with those who have a different view. But Allah sent Musa to Pharaoh. And Allah told Musa, speak kindly to him. Don't go and buff up Pharaoh. Don't get in a big argument with Pharaoh. Speak nicely to him. Perhaps he may listen and take the guidance. And Allah knew Pharaoh wasn't going to do that at all. But he told Musa that, speak kindly to him. So that is how we have to deal with people who are from outside that framework. And then we have to deal with our governments. And I want to say very quickly, because I have 1 minute left, that the Caribbean Muslims have to ensure that these nations, or the nations that we live in, that people do not see us as agents of the Middle East. On the other hand, we have to ensure that we do not see our Caribbean politicians and leaders of the time as agents of Europe, because then we will make all kinds of foolish mistakes. We will have clashes where we don't have to have clashes. There are people who will speak with us and share understandings with us, and we don't have to get into quarrels where it is not necessary. In some cases, our Caribbean leaders have the same struggles that we have trying to face off with Europe. So we have to recognize that. We are citizens of the region, and we should act it, because in the time to come, we want to be in charge of the region as leaders. And as our sister mentioned, she didn't call her name, Kevin Baldeo Singh. A bit of a clown. And I happened to be on a radio program with him some years ago, Thinks he's smart. So somebody raised the question about terrorism. And he says to me, he said, Kwesi, well, all the terrorists in the world are Muslims. And I said, of course, Kevin. The IRA is Muslim. Baader-Meinhof in Germany are Muslim. The Red Army Brigade in Japan are Muslim. The FARC in Colombia are Muslim. He said, no, that's not what I mean. I said, but that's what you say. But that is the gentleman, and, I don't know if putting him off the media is any good thing or whatever it is. We will always have these clumps, and sometimes they help you to carry your message across. So we have to pay attention to that. How do we carry our message? We have a message to mankind, and we should do the best we can in carrying that message forward. In fact, one of the things we need to do is to develop our own Muslim media that can say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum. Shukran for your attentiveness.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Christie. And now, brothers and sisters, once again, it's my pleasure to introduce Brother Dr. Dawood Abdullah.
Ajma'in. But I want to say a few words based on my experiences as a Muslim in the United Kingdom, where there is a very, heated debate on our presence there in the UK and in Europe generally. Now, in 2006, the former mayor of London commissioned a study that was completed. This was Ken Livingstone, Mayor Ken Livingstone. When it was completed, it found that among the findings, that in one single week of coverage of the Muslims, issues related to Muslims and Islam in the UK, 90% of the material was negative in 1 week only. This is my beginning to the discussion, that it has been traditionally, deliberately skewed in a certain manner to present Muslims in a very negative light, to demean, to vilify, and to encourage ultimately the hatred and to generate prejudices against Muslims. Without that, our engagement with civil society and to take on these prejudices, we would not have had a Muslim mayor in London today. We may not agree with everything that he does or says, but at the end of the day, we voted him because, he was a Muslim. He carries a Muslim name. He identifies with our issues for the most part. And the evidence of this is what happened between him and Mr. Trump. As you know, Mr. Trump from day one tried to have a go at him and to criticize him publicly, tweeting against him. When the incidents in London took place, the Westminster attack, it was a terrorist attack, undoubtedly, and we condemn it. Mr. Trump took to Twitter, sphere against, and he said that, if we had a better mayor in London, it would not have happened. But we know, as things develop, because Sadiq Khan, as he is, he didn't take it lying down. He responded in a very responsible and dignified manner. And even though the government had extended an invitation to Mr. Trump to come to London, we now know that that visit has been postponed. He has deferred the visit to London because at the end of the day, the person who is going to host him in our capital city is the mayor, and he's a Muslim. He can't deal with that, so he has deferred, his visit to London. That would not have come about, without a measure of responsibility on our part as Muslims to try to shape the debate and to influence public opinion and thinking on these issues. We cannot afford to be defined by others. We cannot no longer. They want to define us. We must become involved, whether it's in the media or in cyberland. In whatever sphere, we have to speak on our behalf and say who we are and what we represent and what our values are. Because there's a great amount of of fabrication, fallacies, myths out there, about us Muslims. And one of them was promoted by, and some of it is by academicians, by think tanks. One of the most preeminent scholars in the United States, Bernard Lewis, claims to be an authority on Islam and Muslims. He has this theory called Eurabia, and that in 50 years' time, Arabs will take over Europe. And they try to bring certain demographic studies. There's no factual basis to the whole thing, but it's just to whip up hatred and to scare, the European public, that they've promoted these ideas, these theories, in order to marginalize ultimately and to deny us our rights and our place. As we say this morning, the sisters were speaking about a space for women. Well, they try to close a space for Muslims in Europe. Now, take for example, they said one of the other individuals, he's written from the United States, Steve Emerson, also a commentator on Muslims. He stayed in the United States and said that there are no-go areas for whites in England, that Birmingham is a no-go area for whites. And this was patently false. It was wrong. Absolutely wrong. White people could go to Birmingham. In fact, there is a movement away from London to Birmingham. New companies, startups. People are leaving London. But he stayed in America because there's a large concentration of Muslims in Birmingham, yes. But it doesn't mean it's a no-go area for non-Muslims. In the end, he had to apologize when he was exposed, as a fraud, because he claims to be an authority on Muslims and Islam. But they put out these ideas, based on prejudice, based on misinformation. And Muslims, we have to be conscious, we have to be aware, we have to be alert that when these things happen, we have to respond immediately. So that was one example. Another example is this one who advises Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, who was the editor-in-chief of Breitbart, the media outlet for Trump prior to his presidency. Bannon believes that European civilization is based on two pillars, two premises, Judeo and Christianity. And that Islam contributed nothing to Western civilization. And so they have the theory that we are intruders. Muslim, the presence, we are aliens in Europe, in the West generally. And so there has to be a pushback to keep these alien folk from coming to Europe and the West. Historically, we know this is not true. The sciences, the medicine, astrology, physics, all of this, mathematics, they took it from us, from our scholars. We documented it, we wrote volumes. But and so there is this deliberate campaign, process of distortion that has to be countered on our behalf. In our educational institutions, in our public debates, in the media, wherever we find an opportunity, we have to challenge those ideas. Because they encourage, as I said, what? A prejudice, misunderstanding, discrimination, denial. In the United Kingdom, Muslims are at the bottom of the ladder in all forms in every index, in medicine, in medical care, in education, in housing, in employment, even in life expectancy we are at the bottom. We are at the bottom. And how do you reverse this? How do we reverse this? We cannot reverse this by sitting on the margins. We cannot reverse it by sitting in the masjid and grumping. No, we have to participate in the process. We have to seize every opportunity. If somebody writes something, the sister was talking about responding to the peddlers of hate. Yes, write to the editor. Write to the editor. Say, well, you wrote something, very derogatory about us and our culture, demeaning, and it perpetuates a climate of hatred in our community. We don't like it. Of course, if they say something good in the media, commend them. Commend them also. And there are ways. I mean, the whole idea of this session, I believe, is to how we can foster engagement. So we'd have to reach out. I think Brother Suleiman last night was talking about inviting them to our Eid celebrations, etc. We have to do those things. How to win their hearts. How to bring them in so that, we can influence or have an input, get a foothold into what's happening in the media. Unfortunately, again, we have been told that you Muslims, you live in enclaves, and you don't mix. You promote a culture of alienation, and when we engage in politics, when we try to be, when we try to participate, they call us entryous. Entryous is a term which was used in the 1950s for the communists in America. When the communists wanted to participate, they said they are entryous, infiltrators. And so they say that about us today. They don't want us to become alienated, and when we participate, they say you are entryous. That's the kind of thing that happens in the media, and we have to challenge it. In the end, there's just one. Sorry, brother. There's just one thing I want to say. In the whole discussion about Muslims in the media and so on, you often hear about our values and their values. They want to destroy our values, and we have to be critical of this and reject it, because what values they speaking about? We speaking about universal values. Of equality, of justice, consultation. These are the values. These are the premises, the pillars upon which our society was based and built in Medina. He consulted, didn't he? And we had a Bill of Rights in Medina. And the rights of the Jew and the Mushrikeen, as you heard 2 days ago, it was all guaranteed before the Magna Carta. So when the whole thing about justice and so on, the truth is our values are universal values. They are not contradictory to what exists in Europe, and they are not opposed to what exists or what they believe in. In fact, when we examine the reality, we adhere to these values because, mind you, brothers and sisters, a number of academic studies were conducted in the UK about Muslims, and all of these studies show that Muslims are more dedicated citizens. They have a higher sense of citizenship, than any other in the UK. All the academic studies. We have a few, crazies who go out and attack people. But on the whole, the majority of Muslims are law-abiding, decent, forward-thinking people who adhere to values, the universal values. We don't just think for ourselves, but we think for the common good. We think for the common good. And this is what we want to make known to everyone. So with these words, I also would like to conclude on the issue of the alternative media and what we call citizen journalists, where we can write on the internet, in cyberspace, assuming the responsibility of citizens. If they don't want to give us a platform in the media, we can create our own website and give our own analyses of issues. Because the responsibility of the journalist is not to be impartial. He cannot be. How can you be impartial in the face of injustice? You have to take a stand where there is injustice, even if you are journalists. This is what we are commanded to do. With these words, I say thank you.
Takbir. Brothers and sisters, I'm looking at the time, and it's time for Salat al-Zuhr, and we have been trying to coincide our own activities with, the time for Salah, the masjid here. So it's unfortunate, but I think we will have to conclude our session. I'd like to thank all the presenters, Sister Sophia. Pardon? 45? Yeah, but they will need some time to go across and stuff like that. Perhaps after, we can have some other discussion, but I'd like us to, participate in the Salah time with the masjid. Okay, so once again, I'd like to say thank you to Sister Sophia, Dr. Dawood, and Brother Kwesi Atiba. Brothers and sisters, it's unfortunate we don't have, any time remaining for questions. I know a lot of issues were brought up and would have stimulated your thoughts, and you would have had some burning questions, right? But we have to deal with our, be practical and deal with our situation. So thank you everyone, and let's proceed for Salat al-Zuhr. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.